Welcome to chapter 5 of the book of 2 Kings. Story of Elisha, most of it so far. Here we have a man called Naaman. It begins, and Naaman was the ruler of the force of the king of Syria. He's a general, the ruler of the force, powerful man. The dynameos, dynamite, comes from that. And he was a great man before his master. Now here we have Kyriou. It's not the Lord, but it's a master. It's a title, as it always has been translated by the rabbis before Jesus. And they used the title rather than today they would like to make you think that it's the name of God. I mean, God has a name. The only name that it mentions for God is Jesus, Jesus Christ, the name by which you must be delivered, the only name. But so here you see its master title. And he was being an admired person, for through him the Lord gave deliverance to Syria. Now, this is very strange because Syria was the enemy to Israel. Now, whether or not this deliverance was from another power, like the Assyrians, which came from Nineveh over by Iraq today, or maybe it was Israel. And the man was Thanatos, mighty in strength, but leprous, and leprosy. We see rulers and military that have had leprosy. The King Baldwin of the kingdom of Jerusalem, he fought against Saladin, and he was a leper and wore a mask. At least it was that way. There was a movie, Army of God, something like that. But he was a leper, and the Syrians went forth in armed bands, and they captured from out of the land of Israel a small young woman, or a young woman, Neanida. And she was in the presence of the wife of Naaman, so she became sort of a slave, working there in Naaman's house with the wife. And she said to her lady, well, ought that my master, Naaman, was in the presence of the prophet in Samaria. Prophetu, prophet, transliteration. Then he shall cure him from his leprosy. And she, the wife, entered and reported it to her master, Naaman, and said, well, thus and thus says the young woman from out of the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, well, come, enter, and I will send out a scroll to the king of Israel. And he went, and so some person went and took in his hand 10 talents of silver and 6,000 pieces of gold and 10 changes of apparel. Now, assuming this is Naaman that's carrying all these things, and he brought the scroll to the king of Israel, saying, and now, whenever this scroll should come to you, behold, I sent to you Naaman, my bondman, and you shall cure him from his leprosy. I'm laughing because nobody was ever cured, I believe, of leprosy. And it came to pass as the king of Israel read the scroll, the Vivleon, we have a Bible comes from that he tore his garments, and he said, oh my God, the one putting to death and restore to life, that this one sends to me to cure a man from his leprosy? My God, what? For besides, no one see that this one makes an excuse towards me, wants to cause problems, reason to attack me. And it came to pass, as Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king tore his garments, that he, Elisha, sent to the king of Israel, saying, why do you tear your garments? Let indeed Naaman come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. And Naaman came by horse and chariot. A bunch of soldiers come up to Elisha's house. And he stood at the door of the house of Elisha. But did Elisha go out to greet him? All these people? No. It says Elisha sent to him a angelon, a messenger. Now, if it was from God, it would be an angel. Angelon, alpha, gamma, gamma, has something to do with a message. And he was saying, in going, bathe in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall return to you, and you shall be cleansed. And Naaman was enraged. Pride came out. He was too prideful to do what this man was saying here. And he went forth and said, Behold, I said, he will come forth to me and shall stand and call in the name of the Lord his God, and shall place his hand upon the place and shall cure the leper. Me. Are not the Avanah and the Pharpar rivers of Damascus good or better over the Jordan and all the waters of Israel? Shall I not go and bathe in them and be cleansed? Now, Jesus healed the lepers in more than one place in the Bible. With Jesus, though, he didn't have to go and do anything. These lepers, well, they did. They had to go back and be cleansed in the temple, but not the same as here. He has to go down and go down into the to the river, and it says here, going 7 times you shall be cleansed. Okay, and so he turned aside and he went forth in rage. His pride and rage, I'm an important person. He doesn't even bother coming out to me and saying anything. And his servants approached him and said to him, well, his pride overtook him, but yet he had good counselor, wise counselors, and they talked to him and they said, well, if the prophet spoke a great word to you, would you not have done it insofar as he said to you? If he told you to climb Mount Everest, wouldn't you do it if you believed him, or if it was something difficult? But it wasn't. He's something that was easy to do. So they said, well, just bathe and be cleansed. Just do what he says. And Naaman went down and immersed in the Jordan 7 times. Now here we have immerse, evaptisato, the baptize. I translated the word 907, baptizo, into immerse, which it means. For some reason, the King James translators and others decided not to translate the word, but to transliterate the word by making the vita into B and A alpha into A, P into P, baptize, which is a problem in some so-called denominations, of one of which I grew up in. And I knew a lot about it. Went to a grade school, high school, university. It was not Catholic, it was Protestant. And they never immersed anybody. Baptized, yes. And they sprinkled on babies, basically poured water on their heads, wiped them off. And that was what they considered baptism. And I hear from them every once in a while, and they like the Apostolic Bible, except, of course, you made a mistake in immerse. It's not immerse, it's pour or sprinkle. Well, it is. Naaman went down and immersed in the Jordan. He didn't sprinkle. He didn't pour water on him. The Ethiopian eunuch with Philip, he was going down, and he said, there's water enough here to be immersed. They could have sprinkled water on him anywhere, or poured water on him anywhere, but yet he didn't. So if you study the word baptizo, you'll see that it is immerse. And you can go into other profane writings at the time the Bible was written, and it has to do with immersed. There was a boat that was sunk and it was immersed. And so the people that don't like it, see, they're stuck in a more or less in a box, in a denomination or something. They go along with everything that they teach. And if you taught something different, then you would have to get out of the box. And they don't want to get out of the box. They are making money. They're living in, being a pastor of churches and so forth, sort of like the Jews at the time of Jesus. They didn't want to follow Jesus because they would be pushed out of the synagogues. So they have themselves in this position, which is sort of sad, but it is what it is. And I run across them here and there, and I'd hear from them here. And so he did. He went down to the Jordan. Naaman did, immersed 7 times, and his flesh returned. Was it just like a normal man's flesh? No, as the flesh of a small boy. And he was cleansed of the leprosy. Skin was better than normal, I would say. And he returned to the man of God, he and his camp, and came and stood before him, and he said, "Behold, now I know that there is not a God in all the earth, but only in Israel. And now receive a blessing from your bondman." Now, at that time, Israel was where God was working with the peoples, but yet he healed other people in other places. But today, we are healed, and we know God is in all of the earth, and he's working through many countries and many areas all over the world. It's not just in the one place. And so Naaman says, "Receive a blessing from your bondman." And Elisha said, "Oh, as the Lord lives in whom I stand before him, shall I take it?" No. So here we got the E, as I mentioned before, which requires a no, generally a no answer. Shall I take it? No. And he pressed him to take, but he resisted persuasion. Naaman pressed Elisha. And Naaman said, "Well, and if not, let there be given indeed to your bondman a cargo team of mules of earth," that himself. "Give me a cargo, a wagon full of dirt. For your bondman shall not offer any longer a whole burnt offering and sacrifice to other gods, but only to the Lord alone." So he wants the land dirt from Israel to take back and praise God from that dirt on top of it somehow. "And concerning this matter, the Lord deal kindly with me to your bondman in the entering of my master into the house of Rimmon, to do obeisance there." I'm generally saying, and I go in with the king to the house of Rimmon, our idol, and he worships him, gets down doesn't worship, he does obeisance on the ground in front of him, and he apparently is an old man, or he's not in good shape, and he rests upon my hand, he says. I help him. "And I shall do obeisance in the house of Rimmon, in his doing obeisance in the house of Rimmon." So when he goes down, I have to go down. But I really don't want to, but, well, that's just the way it is. It would take a complete break for this general to leave Syria, and apparently he didn't want to do it, so he's making the best of a deal. The best of it, he's in between the rock and the hard place, making the best of it he can by saying, "Well, deal kindly with me," and trying to excuse himself to Elisha. And Elisha said to Naaman, "Go in peace." And he went forth from him into the land of Havrathah. So Naaman now is leaving. And Said Gehazi, that was the servant of Elisha, the man of God, "Behold, my master spared Naaman the Syrian so as to not take from out of his hand of what he brought. As the Lord lives, I shall run after him, and I'll take something from him." And Gehazi pursued after Naaman, and Naaman saw him running. Looks behind, and here's this guy running. He knew who he was. He's after him. And he leaped down from the chariot, Naaman did. So he must have been fairly young and good shape for meeting him, Gehazi. And he said, "Irini, shalom," maybe, in Hebrew. And Gehazi said, "Irini, my master sent me, saying, well, behold, now there came to me 2 young men from Mount Ephraim, from the sons of the prophets. Now, can you give indeed to them a talent of silver and 2 changes of apparel?" And Naaman said, "Well, take 2 talents of silver." And he forced him, and he took to him 2 talents of silver and 2 purses. Go ahead and take them. And 2 changes of apparel. And he gave unto his 2 servants, and that was Gehazi, apparently he even had servants. They carried them in front of him. So now Gehazi here is where Elisha lives, and apparently Elisha, there's a lot of people around him. Gehazi was probably number 2, and then Gehazi had men working for him. And he came to a dark place, and the men, and he took from out of their hands, and he placed them in the house and sent out the men, and they left. So he takes the silver and the clothes and puts them in his hiding spot. And Gehazi, entered and stood before Elisha's master. And Elisha said to him, "From what place did you come from, Gehazi?" And Gehazi said, "Well, your bondman went not here or there, and go anywhere." And Elisha said to him, "Did not my heart go with you when the man turned from his chariot for meeting you? And now you took the silver and the garments, and you shall take with it gardens, and olive groves, and vineyards, and flocks, and herds, and bondmen and bondwomen. You're going to be a rich person, Gehazi. And the leprosy, though, of Naaman shall cleave to you, and among your seed into the eon." Reminds me of the story sort of Ananias and Sapphira, when at the very beginning of the book of Acts, where they held back the sale of a property and didn't give it all, more or less telling the people that they were giving it all, but they weren't, and they were trying to hide it, then make themselves important because they supposedly gave it all. But Peter saw through it, and they ended up dying. Ananias first, they carried his body out to bury it, and his wife came back, found out Ananias, her husband, died, and she fell over, and they came back and carried her out and buried her. So it sort of reminds me of this. And Gehazi, went forth from his face, Elisha's face, being leprous as snow. We'll hear again from Gehazi later on, and the woman that he healed the son, or raised the son from the dead. But before that, we get into the story here now of the sons of the prophets. And to find out what this is all about, our next video seminar, you'll find out. If you join us, and I hope you do. Till then, God bless.